Interchanges go right up to the present, of course, but what I've tried to talk about today are some of the older imprints of the Chinese in Sydney. Of course, today the imprint is strong, it's powerful, it's in all sorts of places in Sydney. These people were the remnants, I guess, of those people who came for the gold rushes in the 1850s, and some of them managed to get a toehold, survive, and some of them even to thrive in what wasn't a very welcoming place in Sydney in the 19th century, but today an important part of our history and our heritage. Thanks very much for listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions. The punch bowl in the Australian Maritime Museum. The big white sails just on the Piedmont side of the Piedmont Bridge. And this museum, this is in a very small museum in the rocks, but it's well worth a look.
You know of the Lockley family established furniture place in Alexandria?
The what family?
Lockley.
I don't know of them particularly. I know there was a survey done of furniture makers in Sydney in about 1921, so I can talk about it because I talk about the 19th century.
Right.
But I think they listed something like 21 Chinese, not all furniture, a lot of them were Chinese firms along the Botany Road.
Yes,
Botany Road. So that was another. That was a later place, but it all sort of began with that. The Goyu Temple in Retreat Street there.
Right. Because we're trying to get some old photographs of the place. The factory. It's my sister-in-law.
Okay, we'll have a chat about it afterwards. Okay. I might be able to give you a few clues.
Sure.
Does that your book cover the Cummins family in George Street?
Oh, not in
your
detail, not like a family history, but I've used some. There was an interview that Albert Cummins did back in the 1980s where he's talking about being organiser of the Chinese celebrations in 1938 for the sesquicentenary of European settlement, and the Chinese put on a huge event in the show, Moore Park, the showgrounds. It's not the showgrounds anymore, whatever it is.
Fox Studios.
Fox Studios, it used to be the showgrounds. Was such a huge success that they had to put it on the second night because everybody couldn't get in the first night. So, and he's talking there about raising money for buying ambulances for the Chinese back in China for the war effort in the 30s, because China is going to war with Japan is going to war with China. So bits and pieces, but nothing. I have you this year again. A whole history of that family should be done.
My cousin, I think, is going to.
All right, good.
I was just surprised you talk mostly about the rocks, because I would have thought that it'd be Chinatown, Haymarket, Surrey Hills. So was the rocks at a different period? Oh, and so later it was more...
The rocks was the first, and I did try to confine what I was saying to the 19th century.
Right.
But certainly by the end of the 19th century, and there's some detailed maps in the book that show this, traders had moved up to this area because the markets were in what's now the Capitol Theatre. But the Dixon Street side of things, nothing much until the 20th century, because again, it grew out of the fact of the location of the markets, because a lot of market gardeners, traders, import, export, trading in bananas from the Pacific, whatever. Most of that was 20th century development, because the city markets weren't built. The city markets were built where the entertainment centre is, and the old Paddy's Market that's still there after about 1910. So some people describe the tracking of the Chinese as a dragon moving with its head in the rocks, its body in the Haymarket here, and the tail. The latecomers over in Dixon Street.
Right.
So that's the sort of history of it.
So the gardens, they didn't actually grow them here. They grew them somewhere else and sold them here. Is that
yes, a lot of them were grown in Alexandria and Waterloo and some were at Rushcutters Bay, some were on the North Shore at Woonaby, but the strongest area was Alexandria Waterloo, just south of the city. And because it's horse and cart days, in the 19th century in particular, a lot of the Chinese market gardeners would come into the city and stay 2 or 3 nights in this area around here, where there were boarding houses here, sell their food into the Belmore markets, where the Capitol Theatre is, and a couple of days later go home. So they had a bit of a city life as well as the working with the others.
Would it be okay to mention that the Cummins story is often given in lecture by 2 of their descendants,
That's right.
Margaret and Cheryl,
Yeah.
and that they are actually in charge of the Chinese Heritage Association of Australia.
I guess
You know
if
about
you don't
that?
know, there's the Chinese Heritage Institute.
Yes,
Heritage
Cha.
and History.
That's Heritage Association
CHAA.
Australia.
Yeah, and that's very active, and that welcomes all comers,
They
Chinese and
do
non-Chinese. Yeah.
give, Cheryl does give this.
See, Margaret and Cheryl
They,
have been
oh,
involved
and
Yes.
yeah,
A long
give,
time.
yes.
They're Almond's nieces.
Right.
Well,
By the book.
everybody, yeah. So you'd just like to join me in thanking Cheryl for. We do have some copies of the book here, which I'm sure Shirley would be happy to sign for you. And today they are only $20 as well.
I should tell you something about that book. How come this Waylo here is sitting there writing a book about the Chinese in Sydney? It was first written, that's the second edition, but first written 20 years ago. And I got roped into it because we had a deputy Chinese Lord Mayor of Sydney, and I was going to a meeting in the town hall one day, and a Chinese man was also going to this meeting. He said, "Where is it?" And I said, "Oh, I know, I'll take you." And we got chatting, and I told him who I was, and he said, "Oh, you're the historian who writes about Sydney and leaves us out." And that is the challenge. And the more you look at it, the more unforgivable it is, because this is a presence that's been here right from the beginning. So I didn't write it thinking I was an expert. I wrote it 20 years ago when there wasn't so much out there in the marketplace, and I often think I should have written it with 10 blank pages at the end so you guys could put the real story in.
It's a lovely story. All right, well, thank you, Shirley, so much.